Good to see all of you. Good to see some new faces as well, which means it's time for another disclaimer in this series. We've been going through the book of Job, which is quite a weighty and large book. And so that being said, if you are just joining us, we have already gone through basically the rock bottom of the book. We've gone through a whole lot of material and a whole lot of questions, not with a lot of answers present. And tonight, we're hitting the part of the narrative. Well, congratulations. If you've been here the whole time, your patience is paying off. The narrative's about to tilt towards answers. I know, nice. Yeah, exactly. It's been going down, down, down. Now it's about to go up, right? And so we're going to be doing that. But if you're just joining us, know that this is a narrative that's building on itself. So if there's a few things tonight, you're like, wait, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I don't get what he's referencing. Just know that thankfully we've been recording these messages and they are up online at the end of every night on the conference website for camp meeting. So if you are just desperate to hear my voice for some reason at other times during the day, you can use your mobile device and go on the website and you can catch the past messages that we've had since Sunday leading up to this point to catch you up, because we had a lot to cover, the three main characters, the three friends, and obviously Job's reactions to all of this. So feel free to go back and unpack that. But tonight, yay, this is exciting. Finally, let's try and turn towards some answers. But just before you get too excited, the book has got to give us the final preparatory step to receive answers. And that's going to take place in the form of someone that up until this point you didn't even know existed in the narrative. In fact, it's going to kind of shock us because you have no indication this guy is even there until, boom, he starts speaking. You go, whoa, where did he come from? Right? And the cool thing is, how fitting for young adults, it's a young adult who shows up. Okay, that should have gotten somebody like, whoop, whoop, yeah. A young adult is going to show up and the narrative is going to change. And we're going to see why that's the case. And it changes for the better, by the way, not the worse. Some of you are like, yeah, young adult stuff, it gets loud, it gets... Okay, no, it's going to change for the better, and we're going to see that tonight. But before we do that, I'm going to take a moment and just have another word of prayer myself. I want to invite you where you are, if you would just bow your heads and ask the Lord to speak to your heart individually, that your heart would be open and your mind would be receptive to the message God has tailored prepared for you this evening. Pray for those around you that they would also receive a blessing. And while you're there, pray that I would be hidden behind the text and we would see Jesus clearly. And after a few moments of silence, I'll bring us together out loud in a close of that prayer, and we'll get started with our message this morning, Words from the Heart. So let's just take a moment and go before the Lord in prayer. Well, Father, we're still here, and we're still in pain in many ways, and we still have questions, and you promised us answers. So we're asking that tonight, as the narrative begins to move towards answers, that you would move our heart to be ready for the answers. May we see you clearly, and may it not just be cliches, but may it be words that speak to our heart, that give us hope, they give us peace, they give us understanding, and give us meaning. May the same Spirit that inspired these words now instruct us to their meaning, for we ask it in the name of Jesus. Amen. If you have your Bible or your PowerPoint, by PowerPoint obviously, that means you power on the Bible app and you point to it, turn to Job, the 32nd chapter. Yeah, I know, you're like, whoa, we made a big jump. But remember, we've been condensing the poetry. And so by the time you finish, that whole big chunk from chapter 4 all the way to here was just the three friends repeating their thing over and 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 over again, and Job repeating that he's innocent over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? They've just had a back and forth, one-way track conversation until you get all the way to chapter 32, when, as I said, a guy called Elihu, what a great name, right? Elihu shows up, the young person, and it's unexpected both to the story and hopefully also to you, because the story kind of hints almost as if he's been there for the entire time of this story, even though he hasn't said one word up to this point, even though the story didn't even mention him showing up. You have no idea who he is, where he came from, how he even got there, why he's even there. All the narrative says is he starts speaking. He's kind of like he's just the character you don't expect in the movie. Like you didn't even know they were supposed to be in the movie, and poof, they just show up, right? And there they are. And he shows up, and the other thing he does interesting is he does all of his speaking like a typical young adult in one go. Okay, because the other friends, right, they would talk a little bit, and then Job would respond, and then they'd talk a little bit, and then Job would respond, and then they talk a little bit, and Job, no. Elihu, he's been quiet, but when he starts talking, you ain't shutting him up. He's getting it all out in a go. His 6 chapters of content are just back to back to back to back to back. He just keeps going. He's not going to be done until he's done. But here's the interesting thing. Even though we have no idea where he came from, or who he really is, or why he's even there, he does begin to speak, and when he speaks, it changes the course of the narrative. And I know it changes this because immediately after Elihu finishes speaking, God shows up to talk. And it's interesting because while I know, because I was looking at what scholars were saying about Job, a lot of scholars lump Elihu in with the other 3 friends and say that he's against God and against Job. But the only problem with that is, surprise, this wouldn't be the first time experts got it wrong. The book of Job disagrees with that assessment in many places. In fact, at the end of the book, which we'll get to later in the week, in chapter 42, God will call out each of the friends for saying wrong things, but he never calls Elihu out for saying wrong things. In fact, he'll call the 3 friends out and tell them they need to offer sacrifices of repentance, but Elihu is never mentioned as having to offer sacrifice. 2 last things that differentiate him in the text is that Job always rebuts the other friends that speak to him. When Elihu is done speaking and before God shows up to talk, Job never takes the opportunity to rebut what Elihu says. And then finally, as if to prove that something must be different about what Elihu is saying, the points that Elihu is going to bring up tonight, God will piggyback on them when he begins speaking and talk about the same things. So there must be something in what Elihu says that's important, that's different, that gets the narrative to change. And so that's what we get to look at tonight. What is the narrative-altering, narrative-shattering message that Elihu decides to share? Well, let's start with the highlights. Chapter 32, beginning in verse 1. Here it comes, the young adult, Elihu. Then these 3 men, that's talking about the 3 friends, right, which was Eliphaz, Bildad, and the guy that was pretty lame Zophar. I did that for Becker because he said that was a pun I missed last night. Anyway, there you go. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. I don't want to miss a pun. Anyway, he wasn't good so far. Here we go. So the 3 friends ceased answering Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. Interesting wording. But the anger of Elihu, the son of Barchiel, the Buzite, I guess he got called to buzz off a lot. Okay, oh, stop. The Buzite of the family of Ram burned. Against Job, his anger burned because he justified himself before God. And his anger burned against his 3 friends because they found no answer and yet had condemned Job. Now, Elihu had waited to speak to Job because they were years older than he. Because again, in that society, old speaks. Old is wisdom. Wisdom gets to speak first. This further proves he's young. He's waiting. Right? So he waited. Verse 5, and when Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of the 3 men, his anger burned. So Elihu, the son of Barchiel, the Buzite, spoke out and said, just pause right there. Elihu, the text says, is upset that Job is blaming God, that the friends are blaming Job, and that this is very interesting, he's most angry because he says the ones that should have had answers don't give them. And by the way, I want to pause on that for a moment because this is another reason I know he's a young adult, because this is an issue that young adults have regardless of what century. The biggest thing I find with young adults when I work with them, right, and as a young adult, the biggest thing that bugged me about the church was I expected the church to have answers. I mean, it just makes sense. All right, give me the answers, and yet all the time it would seem like the church doesn't have any answers. And it's frustrating because you know they should have answers. You ask questions, they go, no, just have faith. You ask questions, they go, no, we don't deal with that, or we don't talk about that. You know the answer has to be there. You know that if there is a God, then the people who follow him should have the answers. And it's very frustrating for young adults. I would think for the older ones too, but maybe they don't admit it. But for young adults, it's so frustrating to know that somebody has to have the answers, but they won't give them. Somebody has to have access to the answers, but they don't even understand them. You feel let down. You feel ripped off. This is Elihu. He feels just like us. He feels just like you because he goes, you know what? You guys should have answers. And you're not giving him any. You're too busy condemning him and not answering him. And Job, you're too busy blaming him. I've got to speak. Go, young adult. Right? Although, to be fair, before the adults freak out that I just told them to go run and scream at the church all day long, we're going to see that Elihu, while he is justifiably mad about that, and you and I should have a right to be mad about that, the way he handles that anger is sometimes different than we. Because, the story would have ended right here if Elihu was like, you don't have the answers, and you suck, and you're robbing me, and goodbye. Right? Can you imagine if he just stormed off? You wouldn't have the rest of the narrative. But thankfully he doesn't. Verse 6. So Elihu, the son of Barkiel the Buzite, spoke out and said, I am young in years. I am young in years, and you are old. He's again confirming that he's a young person. Therefore I was shy and afraid to tell you what I think. Oh, that's a young adult thing too. We don't want to talk and let people know we disagree with them. We don't want to make a fuss in the church. Right? I don't want to speak. Verse 7, I thought age should speak, and increased years should teach wisdom. But it is a spirit in man and the breath of the Almighty that gives them understanding. The abundant in years may not be wise, nor the elders understand justice. So I say, listen to me, I too will tell what I think. Behold, I waited for your words, I listened to your reasonings while you pondered what to say. I even paid close attention to you. Now this is interesting, he listened to them first. He's like, fine, I'll give you a chance to try and explain. He said, I listened while you pondered what to say. I paid close attention to you. Indeed, there was no one who refuted Job, not one of you who answered his words. Verse 13, do not say we have found wisdom. God will rout him, not man. That's a very fascinating statement right there. Elihu goes, you know what? The first thing that bothers me, right? The first thing that bothers me is that you don't realize God is big enough to take care of Job if he's got a problem. You think you have to do it for him. Did you catch that? He's like, God can rout Job if he needs to. You guys don't have to be the hit squad for God. Oh, mercy. Okay? Nobody wants to say anything to that. Maybe you haven't had that experience. That's good. Verse 14, for he has not arranged his words against me, nor will I repay him with your arguments. He's like, Job's done nothing to me. Why would I beat up Job? He's kind of mad at them because, again, Job hasn't done anything to the friends, and they've shown up to all tell him he sucks. All right? He's like, what's the point, guys? Verse 15, they are dismayed. They no longer answer. Words have failed them. He's like, well, you obviously didn't have any answers. Shall I wait because they do not speak, because they stop and no longer answer? I too will answer my share. I also will tell my opinion, for I am full of words, and the spirit within me constrains me. Behold, my belly is like unvented wine, like new wineskins is about to burst. Let me speak that I may get relief. Let me open my lips and answer. This is interesting. He's almost like, it's been bottling up inside me, and I've wanted to say something, and I haven't. I've been respectful, but I can't take it anymore, and I am going to speak. I am going to tell you what is on my mind. Chapter 33. Again, hitting the highlights. Look at verse 8. After he's finished his introduction of saying, I can't help but speak now because I'm just so frustrated. Verse 8 of 33. Surely you have spoken in my hearing. Well, actually, even just go back to verse 1. I don't want to skip that far ahead. However, now, Job, please, watch how he approaches his talk. Hear my speech. Please hear and listen to all of my words. Which, by the way, notice Elihu's motive is already different than the three friends. Because he asked Job to listen rather than start lecturing him. Anyone notice that? None of the three friends said, hey, Job, we got some advice. Would you like to hear? Can we share with you? No, they just show up and like, you suck, you've done something bad, you've done blah, 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 blah. They just launch right in. And Elihu's like, hey, Job, now that I told you I have something to say, would you please listen to what I have to say? People are much more receptive to what you have to say if you ask them if you can share it, right? Instead of just coming up and just dumping the dump truck on them, right? And now, notice he does something else different. Verse 2, behold, now I open my mouth, my tongue and my mouth speaks. My words are from the uprightness of my heart, and my lips speak knowledge sincerely. And now watch this difference that in the narrative should contrast already with the three friends. The Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life. Refute me if you can. Array yourselves before me. Take your stand. Behold, I belong to God like you. I too have been formed out of the clay. Behold, no fear of me should terrify you, nor should my pressure weigh heavily on you. He says two things right here that are very unique. The first thing he does is you're going to start noticing in all of Elihu's talk, he mentions 4 different times the Spirit of the Almighty, the Spirit of God. He's basically trying to say, hey, and in fact, at one point he's going to say, God told me to say this. He believes that the Spirit of God is telling him what to say, whereas Eliphaz just said, a spirit told me this. It's almost as if Elihu wants to make the differential. No, whatever spirit you were talking to was not God. This is God, and this is what he would say. It's like a righteous anger, like, nope, that cannot be from God. I'm going to tell you what the Spirit of God, the Spirit of the Almighty would tell you. And then, just when you think he could be all built up in, triumph, like, ha, I really have the words of God, don't miss what else he did. Right there at the end, he says, hey, I'm formed out of clay like you. I belong to God like you. I don't want to terrify you, and I don't want any pressure on you. Now, this is totally different than the three friends because he wants to stress that he doesn't view himself as better than Job. That's key. He goes, Job, I'm going to share what I'm doing not because I think I've got it together or I'm better than you. We're equal before God. We're both human. We both have mistakes. And I'm not saying what I want to do to fear you, like to freak you out, or to pressure you. I'm just going to share my words. That's a totally different way to start your speech. Verse 8, surely you have spoken in my hearing, and I have heard the sound of your words. It's like, I listened. I am pure without transgression. Now he's quoting what he heard Job say. He's repeating back to him what he heard. You've said, I am pure without transgression. I am innocent. There is no guilt in me. Behold, he, that being God, invents pretexts against me. He counts me as his enemy. He puts feet in the stocks. He watches all my paths. Has he been listening to Job pretty good? So far, it sounds like he's been listening pretty good. Verse 12, behold, let me tell you, you are not right in this. Oh, snap. Right? He's like, I've been listening to your pity party, but you're not right. For God is greater than man. Okay, that's very interesting. He says, I hear you say you're righteous. God's treating you as an enemy, but, verse 13, why do you complain against him that he does not give an account of all of his doings? Indeed, God speaks once or twice, yet no one notices it. In a dream, a vision of the night, when sound sleep falls on men while they slumber in their beds, then he opens the ear of men and seals their instruction, that he may turn man aside from his conduct and keep man from pride. He keeps back his soul from the pit and his life from passing into Sheol. Basically, this is very fascinating. Again, in poetry, you can miss it. But pay close attention. He goes, listen, you complain to God because you say God is not explaining himself to you. Yet how often does God speak multiple times to people and we still do not listen? That's an interesting question. You're like, Job, you're mad he's not explaining himself, but how many times have we seen 2, 3 times? That's verse 14. He's like, God says multiple things and yet we do not hear. We don't listen. Interesting point, Elihu. He goes, listen, God does give answers. Then he goes on to say, listen, God's given dreams to people. And if there's an interpreter, that's good. And you almost get the idea that Elihu is hinting as he builds to his point, that he's like, listen, Job, the answers sometimes are all around us, but we don't want to see them. Is that true? He's like, sometimes, Job, God will show you 2, 3, 4, 5. He's trying to give answers, but you just like, I don't see anything. Sometimes the problem isn't a lack of answers, but a lack of truly wanting them because what it might mean. Whew. Go, young adult. Jump down to verse 26. Because I love this contrast too. I just love Elihu. He's my favorite character in this book. Other than God, obviously, but 26. Then he will pray to God, and he will accept him, that he may see his face with joy, and he may restore his righteousness to man. He will sing to men and say, I have sinned and perverted what is right. It is not proper for me. He has redeemed my soul from going to the pit, and my life shall see the light. Behold, God does all these oftentimes with men, to bring back his soul from the pit, that he may be enlightened with the light of life. I love this. Elihu has just made the point that God often speaks and we don't listen. But then he contrasts it and said, guess what? When someone prays to God, he always listens. It's a beautiful contrast. He says, God speaks and we don't listen. But guess what, Job? Whenever we speak to God, he never fails to listen. I love the contrast. He's like, God is not like us, Job. God will speak and we're like, blah, 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 blah. We won't listen. But when the moment you try and talk to God, he's right there listening. He drops everything like, yes, 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 I'm going to hear. Yes, yes, speak, 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 speak. And I love that because God is not human, in the sense that he's not us. We don't listen, God always listens. We won't speak, but God will speak. I love it. I love it. What a contrast. Jump down to verse 31, right? Pay attention, Job, listen to me. Keep silent and let me speak. Then if you have anything to say, answer me. Speak, for I desire to justify you. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Did you catch verse 32? What's the point even in Elihu sharing all of this? He says, my desire is to what? He wants to justify Job rather than condemn him. But more than that, did you notice that up to this point, Job, the three friends, everything they've said was to justify their opinion, to justify their position. And Elihu's basically going, I don't care what you think about me, but I want to help you. My intent in sharing this is actually to help you, not prove any point of mine. Like everything about Elihu's desire and heart is just totally different here. Chapter 34, he goes on, Elihu continued and said, hear my words, you wise men. Now he's talking to all of them. Listen to me, you know it. For the ear tests words and the palate tastes food. Let us choose for ourselves what is right. Let us know among ourselves what is good. For Job has said, I am righteous, but God has taken away my right. Should I lie concerning my right? My wound is incurable, though I am without transgression. What man is like Job, who drinks up derision like water, who goes in company with the workers of iniquity and walks with the wicked men? For he has said, it profits a man nothing when he is pleased with God. Basically, and this is kind of, again, wordy poetry, but he's saying, listen, guys, you've all basically said you're righteous and God wounds you, and then you had the nerve to go on and say that there's no benefit to delight in God. All this suffering proves there was no point in following him to start with. And then he starts hitting his point, verse 10. Therefore, listen to me, you men of understanding. Okay, he's definitely a young adult. He's kind of, poking him in the eye. Oh, yeah, you guys are so wise. Here, I'll ask you a question. Far be it from God to do wickedness, and from the Almighty to do wrong. For he pays a man according to his work, and he makes him find it according to his way. Surely God will not act wickedly, and the Almighty will not pervert justice. This is the total opposite of everything everybody said at this point. He who gave him authority over the earth, and who has laid on him the whole world, if he should determine to do so, if he should gather to himself his spirit and his breath, all flesh would perish together, and man would return to the dust. This is a fascinating point for him to make. It's actually a point that Paul will pick up in Colossians in the New Testament. He goes, listen, God never does evil. God never does injustice. After all, think about it. If God was really interested in torturing you, if God was really interested in doing all the bad things you say that he's out doing in the world, well, why does he even have to go to this kind of sadistic level to do it? All he'd have to do is stop thinking about us and we would cease to exist. He's using logic. He goes, that doesn't make sense to me why God would be doing all of this garbage when there's so much simpler ways for the God of the universe to take care of us. He could just be like, oops, I forgot about him. Poof, you're gone. Paul says the same thing in Colossians 1. He goes, by him all things consist and have their their bearing, their existence. If God just withdrew it, we'd all die. The fact that you and I are alive means God's still thinking about you. That should be good news. You're still alive. God hasn't forgotten you. Right? Then he keeps going. I'll just hit it. Verse 21, for his eyes are upon the ways of man. He sees all of his steps. I love this. He's like, God has not lost sight of you. All the pain you're going through, no, he's not unaware. He is not taking his eyes off of you, Job. There is no darkness or deep shadow where the workers of iniquity may hide themselves. He goes, God's seeing everything. Jump down to verse 27. Again, hitting the highlights. Because they have turned aside from following him and had no regard for any of his ways. Now he's starting to explain why many people suffer. Not all, but why some do. And it's interesting. He makes a point that sometimes I think we, even as Christians, don't present very well. Something that the Proverbs says in Proverbs 8. Sin is not an alternative lifestyle. It is not a secondary option to, well, I don't like God's way, so I'm going to try this and see if I can make this work. Sin is basically suicide. Because the creator of the universe set everything up to work a certain way, and if you don't go that way, it doesn't work. I don't know if that made any sense to you. Right? There's only one way the universe is orchestrated to work out right. And if you step off of that and you're like, I'm going to try this way, it's like you're designed to breathe. And if one day you're like, you know what, I don't think breathing's a really great idea, I'm going to cease breathing. Are you going to live very long? No. Right? Because you're designed to what? To breathe. And this is what Elihu's saying. He's like, you think all this stuff is going, but he's like, no, the wickedness people do, it doesn't work. It was never meant to work. It's not that you tried it and it didn't work because God hates you. It just doesn't work. That's not God doing it. It just doesn't work that way. You stop breathing, you die. It's not like, well, I stopped breathing and I died and God made me die. Well, verse 34. Men of understanding will say to me, and a wise man who hears me, Job speaks without knowledge, and his words are without wisdom. Job ought to be tried to the limit, because he answers like wicked men. For he adds rebellion to his sin. He claps his hands among us and multiplies his words against God. He goes, all of you are speaking without wisdom, and I know it because you're speaking against God. Okay, it's a little bold. Get to the point, Elihu, 35. Elihu continued and said, do you think this is according to justice? Do you say my righteousness is more than God's? He's like, I've been listening and you're really actually claiming to be more righteous than God. Is it right to think a life of sin would be as profitable as righteousness? I will answer you. Right, verse 3, for you say, what advantage will it be to you? What profit will I have more than if I had sinned? He's basically like, man, if all this suffering's hitting, why didn't I just go live something without God? It would have been just as bad. I will answer you and your friends with you. Look at the heavens and see, and behold the clouds. They are higher than you. If you have sinned, what do you accomplish against him? And if your transgressions are many, what do you do to him? If you are righteous, what do you give to him? Or what does he receive from your hand? Your wickedness is for a man like yourself, and your righteousness is for a son of man. This is a powerful point. He basically goes, all right, Job, finally, I'm here. Let's raise our mind to the heavenly perspective. He goes, righteousness or wickedness does not make as big a difference with God as it makes a big difference with us. That's deep. He goes, do you think you being wicked gives anything to God or takes it away? Do you think being good gives it to God or takes it away as much as it does something to you? Right? I mean, you're the one getting hurt. Yes, he's going to get into the heart of God, and God is not immune from the pain we're going through. But the first point he's bringing, he's like, listen, making good choices or bad choices, the first person it hits is you. Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever noticed people that are so bitter or angry at someone, they're like, I'm going to get them back, I'll show them, and they go do something dumb to themselves thinking it's going to hurt them? I mean, we do that, don't we? And you don't really affect them, right? I mean, that was one of the biggest things I had to learn even in my life. I remember when I got out of this horrible, well, let me rephrase that. The relationship itself wasn't horrible. What was horrible is when my best friend at the time, when she dumped me and went with him. Right? Yeah, right. And, and I was so mad about that I thought I'd get him. And so how I thought I'd get him was be bitter and like stew about it and say nasty things about him in my mind and whatever. But, here's the funny thing about bitterness, folks. It's like drinking poison and expecting the other one to drop dead. He was still with the girl. He was still moving on in life. He didn't know I was sitting at home like, I hate this. He's eating the whole pizza and I'm sitting at home, I don't want to eat. I hate life. I want to die. It didn't affect, I mean, it's funny, but it's not, because that's what we do, but it's not affecting them. It's affecting me. And he goes, Job, you guys, I mean, the majority of what you're doing, it's doing stuff to you more than it is to him. What do you think you're accomplishing with that? I mean, do you really think God's got mad that he's like, I'm going to punish you further because you ticked me off? I mean, he's like, you're hurting yourself. Elihu's bringing us back to the idea of individual choices. Not everything in the narrative of Job, obviously, is Job making choices to do that. That's not the main point Elihu's getting at, but a lot of suffering in our world is because of choices we make against ourselves, that other humans make against themselves or others. And that's the hardest thing about suffering, because just like we get affected by people's choices that weren't ours, other people are affected by the choices that we make that weren't theirs. We're victims and victimizers simultaneously. We get hurt and we hurt others all at the same time. He was like, Job, you've got to think differently. And then, oh man, now Elihu is going to hone in on what God is doing in the midst of this suffering here. And what he says here is like mic drop. This is great. Verse 13. Surely God will not listen to an empty cry, nor will the Almighty regard it. How much less when you say you do not behold him? The case is before him, and you must wait for him. And now because he is not visited, don't miss this, now because he is not visited in his anger, nor has he acknowledged transgression well. Okay, this is deep. I got to unpack this. This is one of the most profound lines Elihu says. He goes, God does not respond to empty cries. And then he goes on to explain what he means by that. He goes, Job, he hasn't responded to your words in anger, and you're using that merciful silence to speak against him. This is deep. Wow, think about this. How often are the words that we direct even to humans, yet alone God, how often do the words we direct at him not really to him? You know what I'm talking about? Like, I mean, think about it. When you're stressed and you're angry and you're hurt and you go vent to a friend, do you often say stuff to friends that's not really about them or to them? You just got to get that off your chest. You know what I'm talking about? You just got to vent it, right? And the cool thing about a friend is a friend knows you're hurting and you got to vent that so they don't take it personally when you say something mean. Right, when you say something stupid, because they're like, okay, they're stressed, they got, they're hurt, they got to say something. And this is what Elihu's saying. He's like, listen, this whole time, all these questions, all this stuff you've been screaming out to God, you haven't really, you're venting, but you're not really actually asking God anything. Okay, you're not expecting answers as much as you're just needing someone to listen. And he goes, listen, just like with friends in that situation, God is doing the same, and he's big enough to hold your emotions and to take the stuff you beat him up with and not punish you for stuff he knows is just your emotions. I got to repeat this. This is amazing, because if I had only known this earlier in my life, it would have helped me in a lot of stress. How many times are you going through stress? Are we getting hurt? Suffering's going on. And that you know that probably you should talk to God or you should do something, but the last thing you want to do because you're so angry and you're so bitter and you're so hurt and you're so mad is you don't want to talk to God, because the thing we've always been taught is if I go to God right now, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind, and if I do that, it's lightning bolts from heaven and fricasseed earth. Right? Strap on a feed bag of buttered popcorn because it's Armageddon tonight, You suck, you've done that, and Henry's gone. Right? Now you laugh, I'm exaggerating that, but that's kind of what we think in the back of our minds. I'm not going to talk to God. I know I should probably talk to God, but I'm not going to talk to him now because it will not end well. Right? Because, I can't tell God that. Okay, well, first of all, I'm not meaning this to be, insensitive, but you don't think God already knows what you're thinking? You're like, well, I don't want to tell him that I hate him right now. Well, surprise, newsflash, he already knows. And he didn't fry you right now for thinking it, so why do you think he's going to fry you for saying it? Right? At least you don't have to be a hypocrite in that sense, because at least you're not like, I hate you, but trying to be nice to him, when you're at church or whatever. It's like he knows. He knows. Okay? And here's the cool thing Elihu says. He says, okay, Job, I need you to understand something right now. These 30 chapters where you've all been like bickering back and forth and yelling at God and doing whatever, and you're mad that God hasn't said anything yet. He said, first of all, you need to realize God knew you needed to vent, and you shouldn't be mad at him for being big enough to let you vent and not smacking you down for what you were saying, because he knows you didn't really mean it. God's going to respond when you really want an answer. But the interesting thing is the three friends in Job to this point, they've asked a lot of questions, but they're not really asking questions. They're saying stuff to prove their point, right? But they're not really interested in an answer. Because Job asked the questions to say, see, I asked God and he wouldn't respond because it proves that he's doing this to me. And the three friends were like, well, God doesn't have to speak because he already told us in a vision, and we know the truth. And they're just hitting it with him, right? And Elihu's like, God is big enough to handle your venting. And Job, that's what he's doing. You're venting right now. That's why he's silent, because you're in the vent stage. And you're venting, and he's big enough to hold it. And I love that because that's the best thing about God. The first descriptive word in the Bible about his character in 1 Corinthians 13 is love is patient. And it's a good thing, because if God wasn't patient, we'd all be dead. Which, by the way, later on in that passage, because he's patient, it says that's why love can bear all things, believe all things, hope all things, and then that key word, endure all things. He can put up with your venting session. He can put up with your anger. He endures it because he loves you. He's a friend. He's like, okay, you're in vent stage. You need to vent? Go ahead. Unload. Give it to me. Oh, and I love where Elihu goes next. Chapter 36, look at 2. We're almost through his message here. Elihu continued and said, wait for me a little, and I will show you. There is yet more to be said in God's behalf. I will fetch my knowledge from afar. I will ascribe righteousness to my Maker. For truly my words are not false. One who is perfect in knowledge is with you. Behold, God is mighty, but he does not despise anybody. He's mighty in strength of understanding. He doesn't keep the wicked alive, but he does give justice to the afflicted. He does not withdraw his eyes from the righteous, but with the kings on the throne. He has seated them forever, and they are exalted. If they are bound in fetters and are caught in cords of affliction, then he declares to them their work and their transgressions, that they have magnified themselves. He opens their ear to instruction and commands that they return from evil. If they hear and serve him, they will end their days in prosperity and their years in pleasures. But if they do not hear, they shall perish by the sword, and they will die without knowledge. But the godless in heart lay up anger. They do not cry for help from he who binds them. They die in youth, and their life perishes among the colts. He delivers the afflicted in their affliction, and he opens the ear in time of oppression. Then indeed he enticed you from the mouth of distress, but instead of it, in a broad place with no constraint, and that which was set on your table was full of fatness. Now this is a lot of poetry again, but this is basically what he's saying. Listen. God doesn't despise anybody, and he's full of understanding. He doesn't defend the wicked, but he's not losing sight of you either. He often uses the affliction of the righteous, that was verse 15, to deliver them. See, because this is fascinating. He's basically going, listen, God hasn't lost sight of you, first off. Second of all, God is not trying to beat anybody up. And third, even though all this junk is happening to you, the amazing thing about God, right, is that God will actually try and make something good come out of it. He doesn't cause it, but he plies it. In other words, this is something we often don't think about, but think about this. Whether you believe in God or not, you suffer. I hope that's not a newsflash to anyone. Whether you're an atheist or a preacher in a church, you still suffer. You ever notice that there doesn't seem to be any distinction between that? Everybody suffers. If you're human and on this dirt bowl, you suffer. But Elihu goes, the only difference is that while both suffer, God will take the righteous' suffering and try and make something good come out of it. He'll try and actually pull some sort of hope and some sort of out of the worst that we, others, or Satan throws at us. Everything gets thrown at you, and I love this about God, is you almost feel sorry for Satan, almost. Right? Can you imagine? Satan comes up with the most elaborate plans to smack somebody down, and while he's in the middle of beating it, somehow God designs something so that every punch the devil lands is actually doing something good. It'd be frustrating if I was the devil, right? I've got this elaborate plan. I'm going to get him. Ha ha ha. And you throw it all in, you're like, no, he has more faith. Ha ha, I'm going to beat you. No, now he's in a better relationship. Okay, I'm not going to hit him. No, what is it? Right? I mean, you almost feel sorry for him. Almost. I don't, but, I tried to sympathize with him, but I don't. Anyway, right? He was like, God's going to do this, and then, oh man, again, verse 16, because I don't want to miss this. This is another great line. Indeed, he has, now, in this version, it says he has enticed you from the mouth of distress. Come back to that. Instead of at a broad place with no constraint, that which was set on your table was full of fatness. But you were full of judgment on the wicked. Judgment and justice take hold of you. Beware that wrath does not entice you to scoffing, and do not let the greatness of the ransom turn you aside. Verse 16, don't miss this. He says, even though mine says entice, the Hebrew here, basically, it would better translate as he wants to allure you out of this distress. And that's a very interesting word for Elihu to use. Basically, he says this, in the midst of your pain, God's intent is he wants to somehow woo you. He wants to allure you. He wants to somehow draw you close to his heart, but you are too busy judging the wicked. That's a very fascinating line. He goes, God is wanting to draw close to you in this moment, but you're too busy judging. And you're judging him just like the wicked do. Have you ever thought about that? That God might be trying to get close to you, but you don't let him because you're just too busy judging him? Do we do that to people? Someone tries to draw close to you. Someone's trying to ask for forgiveness. Someone's trying to mend the bridge, and you're just so mad you keep shooting it down. Hey, listen, man, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, you suck. Well, dude, I'm really sorry. Yeah, you should be sorry. You did this. We do that. We burn the bridge they're trying to build to get back to us. We put a hole in the parachute they're trying to put on us, No, I refuse. Then this, verse 24, right at the end of this chapter. Therefore, men fear him, but he does not regard those who are wise of heart. That's very fascinating. Basically, and this is, because Elihu has just moved into talking about creation. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because God's going to do a better job of it than he does. He's God. But, he's going to pick up on the same topic. But here's the thing. Even back up to verse 21, because I really need to set this context, because this is the crux of his argument. Now men, this is chapter 37, verse 21. Now men do not see the light, which is bright in the skies, but the wind has passed and cleared them. Out of the north comes golden splendor. Around God is awesome majesty. The Almighty, we cannot find him. He's exalted in power, and he will not do violence to justice or abundant righteousness. Therefore men fear him, but he does not regard those who are wise of heart. First of all, okay, ladies, this guy's poetic ability is beyond compare. I know the English doesn't translate very well, but if you could just read this in Hebrew, you'd be like, okay, come here, boy. This guy, I really like his poetry. I'm just saying that, whatever. When I read it, I was like, whew, okay. Because this is what he says. He has a lot of great one-liners, and here it goes. He basically says, men don't see the light even when the sky is full of brightness. Well, that's pretty good. I'm going to say that again. He goes, men don't see the light even when the sky is full of light. And he's getting at something. He goes, God is excellent in power, justice, and righteousness. He doesn't afflict, and then the clincher. The thing that Elihu was building all of this up to say, and the thing that's going to allow God to show up and start talking. He says this, that last line in 24 again, I'm going to say it again. He does not regard any who are wise of heart. This is basically what he says. Here's his mic drop. He's built. He said a lot of things, and then he goes, you can't even see the light even though it's there because God doesn't respond to those who think they know everything. Mic drop. Goodbye. I'm done. Basically, this is what he's saying. The three friends and Job, up to this point, have all assumed they know the answers. Their questions are less an attempt to understand than they are to justify their positions. And we often do the exact same thing when we talk to God. We're not actually trying to ask questions. We're trying to inform God why he should support our opinion. Why he should do what we expect him to do because we just know the situation and he doesn't. And Elihu basically saying that. He basically goes, hey, listen, the gist of Elihu's message. God has answers. He wants to answer Job. But however, we often don't listen or really even want those answers. And though we don't listen to him, though, Job, God always listens to us. And if God wanted evil for us, he could just stop thinking about us and we'd all die. But our choices and the choices of others are impacting us, which begs us to take our choices seriously. And on top of that, by the way, the reason he hasn't said anything yet is because God is letting you vent, and he doesn't despise you, so he's not smiting you for yelling at him. He loves you. He wants to bring good out of this. He's giving a multitude of evidences all around you that he loves you, and if you'd be willing to see it and not think you had all the answers already, he could give you the answer. Whoa. That got deep. What about you? What about you? Do you even want to believe God has answers to your questions? Do you even want to believe that God actually wants to answer you? Then the next question, are you even willing to listen to his answers? Are you willing to entertain the possibility that God does not desire evil for you? And are you willing to ask God to help make better choices? Are you willing to go, and this is going to be the challenging part, because the rest of this narrative is going to be answers, but I know everyone in this room, before we can have the answers, you might be, tonight, of all nights, tonight you might have to do something you've never wanted to do, but you're going to have to do. And no, this is not going to be, okay, I have to accept the Lord. That's not what I'm going to. This is something probably no preacher's asked you to do, but it's going to change tonight. Some of you, probably all of us, are you willing tonight to go and yell at God? You're like, wait, what? What kind of appeal is that? Some of us are never going to be ready for the answers until we get off our chest all the anger and bitterness and pain and stuff and frustration. We just bent up in here because we're like, no, I got to put on the face and God would be angry at me or whatever. And Elihu says, okay, Job, right now, the reason you're all like this is because you're not getting rid of it. You're not ready for it. You think you know everything and you're just angry and you're bitter. And he goes, and guess what? God knows that. And he always listens to us even when we don't listen to him. And he goes, he's big enough to take it. And he's been letting you vent, Job, so that once you get that off your chest, then he can come in and answer you. Then he can draw you close to his heart and be like, all right, here's the answers you were really looking for. Some of us are angry at God. And here's the good news. You've been angry at him a while, and he hasn't killed you. The lightning hasn't fallen. You haven't gotten some plague and fallen, He's known. And guess what? The God of the Bible is big enough that he sat back and let you be angry. And he's not punished you for it. He's not tried to make your life miserable and toy with it because of that. He's just waiting for you to get to the point where you're willing to talk with him about it. He's a friend. He wants you to vent. He wants you to get it off. He already knows anyway, but you need that release. We need that. You can't make a step forward if all of that's just crammed right down deep in you. It chokes the light out of your heart and suffocates the oxygen. There's no room for answers. There's no room for hope because all you've got in there is anger and bitterness and resentment and and God says you got to get that out. And you don't get it out by going, never mind, I don't feel that way. You get it out because you get it out. But here's the good news. Unlike humans, unlike church people, unlike pastors or whatever, if you were to do that to some human, they'd probably just slug you. Or they'd be like, I'm not your friend anymore. They walk off, but God's like, no, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm big enough. Go ahead, vent. I'm not going to punish you. I know it's your emotions. I know you've got to wrestle with that. Get it out. You get it out, and then I'm going to be ready to allure your heart, and I'm going to be ready to give you answers when you're ready for them. I want to give you answers, but I know if I give them right now, it's not going to work because we got to deal with that. Your emotions are important too. It's not just all about knowledge. It's about the heart. And God goes, you know what? I love you enough. Go ahead. Beat me up. Go ahead, let it go. Is there anyone willing tonight to say, and maybe I won't even ask you to raise your hand because, we're all still in there like, I don't want to say I want to do that to God, but this is my challenge to you. I want you to leave this place tonight. Go find a place where you can be just you and God and your thoughts. And I want to challenge you, as Elihu did, vent to him. Let him have it. If you need permission from someone here, as a pastor telling you, let him have it. That anger you've been holding on, that bitterness you've been holding on, all the times that you just know God did this to you, that's fine. Don't be like, okay, I can't say it that way because we've been learning this week he didn't do it. No, it doesn't matter whether we know now that he didn't do it or not. You have carried for a long time the belief that he did, and your emotions should never be discredited. Your experiences should not be discredited. That's how you felt, and you need to express that. Get it out. You need to go and find a spot and say, all right, God, I've been holding back, but here, you asked for it, here you go, and give it to him, because you are not going to be able to move forward until you do that. But here's the good news. Oh, here's the good news. He's not going to be angry at you for doing that. He's not going to shout back at you and be like, let me show you how smart I am and how dumb you are. He's not going to do any of that. Just like with Job, we've had 36 chapters of them all yelling at God, and you want to know why God hasn't spoken? Because he's not interested in being right. He's interested in getting them help. He's like, I'll sit back and let you do it until you feel better. Took them 36 chapters. It might take you 36 minutes. It might take you 3 minutes and 6 seconds. I don't know why, but give it to him. Give it to him. He's not going to kill you. He's not going to forsake you. He's not going to be like, nope, all right, you said the wrong thing. You're done. But he loves you enough, and he's big enough that he says, I'm the only safe place you can give it. Let me take that. Let me take that. Because your emotions matter. Your feelings matter. God is validating your feelings. He says, okay, that's how you feel. Whether it's right or wrong, that's how you feel. Give it. It's my challenge to you. As weird as it is. Let it go. Give it to him. Just let him know how you felt. Let him know the times you thought he left you behind. That he wasn't there for you. That you prayed and asked for him to help your life get better, and all of a sudden everything got worse. And you just know he had to have done it. When I prayed for it to get better, I didn't mean for you to take everything from it. If that's how you feel, let him know. Let it bleed. Because only when you got nothing, only when you finally let that release happen, can you be ready for answers. And God wants to give you answers, and God does have answers. He has them for Job. We're about to see him. But he knew Job couldn't have them until he got that out. I'm so glad we serve a God that's big enough to say, you know what? I know you need that. Let it go. Let it go. We're going to sing a song. And as we sing that song, again, I want you to just make that commitment in your mind that you're going to spend the time. Please don't rob yourself. Find that space for our next meeting and let it go. You're not going to regret it. And God's not going to hate you. Because his only desire is to allure you to his heart. But you got to empty the heart of what you got there now before he can fill it with something better. Let's pray. Father, it's kind of a scary thing to think about, coming to you and saying all sorts of stuff. Probably not going to be pretty stuff. We're still going to feel awkward even doing that. There's going to be that residual fear in the back of our mind, but I just want to thank you that you love us enough to let us vent. That you love us enough that you don't discredit our feelings and you don't discredit our pain. You don't go, well, you shouldn't feel that way. The 3 friends might have done that. Our friends might do that. Our church family might do that. Our parents might do that. Our spouse or our significant others might do that, but you don't. You say, you know what? Let it go. I love you enough. I'll sit here and just let you vent. I'll just let you get it out. Father, I pray you give strength and an extra special assurance of your presence tonight to each and every person in this room, because it's going to be scary when we vent. But it's necessary, and we're so thankful that you are willing to sit through the worst we can throw at you just so that we could feel better, just so that we could find healing. Tonight, may we really be willing to admit that we don't have all the answers. Maybe we be willing to be honest about what we've really felt all along. May we share our heart with you truly as it feels, so that we'll be ready for you to share your heart with us as you truly feel. Guide us in that process, we ask, for we ask it in the name of Jesus. Amen.